I'm a father, or at least I was. After today's events, I no longer know who I am. I'm so broken. Sleep was something that had returned to my life. Compared to in the infant months of restless nights, it was heaven having a 2-year-old. But it was with mixed feelings that our son, Mikey, was finally old enough for daycare. Myself and my wife missed him a little. For the few hours each day he was away. We both worked from home, and the house felt a little empty without him. But otherwise, all was fine. Until today. 2 p.m. rolled around, and Jen asked me to bring some butter home as I headed out to pick up Mikey. It all went downhill from there. First was the flat tire. I rolled over a piece of wood with a nail in it that must have fallen off a truck. I had the spare on in no time, but I would be late to pick up Mikey, and that frustrated me. I guess I was a little embarrassed arriving late, as if this made me a bad parent. Mikey himself wouldn't mind or even notice. He'd be engrossed with the extensive collection of toys there. When I pulled up at the daycare, 30 minutes late, I was surprised to see a lot of cars in the lot. But the little playground outside was empty. When I entered the small one-story building, all was quiet. A large woman, who usually mans the front desk, was gone. Left for the day, maybe. I let myself through into the hallway. It was also empty. A tricycle sat there, abandoned under the pale strip lights. As I walked further down the hall, I called out, "Hello?" My voice was loud in the silence, and then I stopped, frozen in my tracks. On the ground in front of me was a footprint. It was red. It was blood? I couldn't be sure, but it was not a child's footprint. I tried not to panic. It's dye, or it's paint, or it's jam. I told myself all the harmless things it could be, and I pushed away the invasive thoughts of kidnapping and mass murder and shooters. But I was now too afraid to call out. Although every part of me wanted to scream Mikey's name. And then at the end of the hall, movement. A small form crawled quickly out of one door and into another. The silence broken only by the creak of the door, as it swung open and closed again. I hurried forward towards the door where the child had disappeared. When I got to the door, I looked through the small glass panel, but the lights were off. I quietly pushed the door open and felt for the switch on the wall. When I found it, dozens of eyes turned in my direction. Child eyes reacting to the light. And under the children were corpses. Parents, the daycare staff, Debbie, the large woman from reception, all lifeless and soaked in their own blood. The children's mouths were red, too, as if they'd been feeding on the adults. I felt puke rise up from my stomach, but I held it in. I had no time to be sick. One of the kids broke away from its meal and scurried on all fours towards me. I slammed the door in her face. Like hell, that thing was getting near me. I peered back through the glass. The little girl was banging her head on the door, trying to get at me. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The other children crawled over to join her. I searched desperately with my eyes. Mikey wasn't there. The banging was increasing. Faster, more heads. So I ran for it. I checked other doors as I hurried through the hall. Behind me, the tiny but somehow very speedy mob of toddlers crawled after me. I had to be quick. Where was Mikey? I tripped over the damn trike, banding my knee badly and twisting something in my ankle. I yelled out in pain, but was up again. Now limping. I entered the closest door and shut it behind me. There was no lock, so I jammed a chair under the handle. The only full-size chair in the room. It was a playroom. Everything else was child-sized, including the child who sat facing away from me in the center of the playroom floor. Mikey? The kid turned toward me. Not Mikey. He was Asian, with a bowl cut. His mouth bloody, his pupils large and black like grapes. He stood and waddled towards me. And I'm so ashamed, but out of fear, I kicked out with my good leg, and I booted that small child. He flew a few meters across the room, tumbling through wooden blocks and stuffed toys. But in a moment, he was upright again like a cat, like nothing happened. He came running back towards me. I grabbed the chair from under the door and pulled it open. I used the chair as a shield from the swarm outside the door, pushing the savages out of the way. The chair leg caught a chubby kid in the eye and he growled at me like a feral dog. I felt terrible. Did I hurt him? Then kid grabbed the chair leg and somehow wrenched it from my grasp. Shocked by their strength, I retreated as best I could on my busted ankle. They were quick, but their legs, little. The last door left unexplored were the toilets. Once inside, there was nothing to block the door with, just 3 stalls and a couple miniature urinals. I pushed open the first stall, and there he was. Mikey, my boy, my angel. But he was different. He sat there quietly on the toilet, gnawing on something. Mikey, I said, it's Daddy. He barely looked up, but enough for me to see that his eyes had changed too, and that he was chewing on a dismembered ear. The swarm was coming through the door from the hall now. I shut the little stall door, locking me and Mikey inside. Heartbroken, my eyes full of tears, I tried to stroke Mikey's hair. In return, he lunged and tried to go for my neck. After a prolonged struggle and many scratches, I managed to restrain him with my sweater. I can't bear to see him like this, hog-tied on the floor, writing around furiously. The other kids banging on the stall door. There's no way out, and I'll have to call for help soon. I just wanted to spend a little more time with my only boy. It's tofu. My family eats tofu, guys. Did you think I meant people or something? Goodness, you all have sick minds. I'm really not here to ruin Thanksgiving for you. My family takes it very seriously. I love Thanksgiving. Being a teenage guy, it might be the one holiday a year I actually get to eat as much as I want. Plus, it's a family holiday. When you have a family as big as mine, every gathering is a frat party. People are coming in and out every second. Raucous laughter comes from every room, and by the end, something is bound to break. My dad had 9 siblings. All of them had at least 3 kids. Growing up, my best friends were my cousins, and I had at least one uncle as a teacher each year of high school. Whenever we all meet up, we do it at my grandma's house, which may literally be the only house in town big enough to hold us all. This Thanksgiving, it was my Uncle Steve to greet me at the door. Cooper? He slapped me on the shoulder, then patted his belly. Ready to eat? I've been training all year. It's a bit of a joke in my family. Almost everybody, on my dad's side, is on the bigger side. Most of the year, we blame it on genetics. But the closer we get to Thanksgiving, the more we blame it on that. We're not overeating. We're training. I rolled my eyes at Steve, grinned, then carried my family's pumpkin pie to the large dining room table with the rest of the food. I placed it next to the tofu turkey, 3 tins of gravy, and 5 plates of baked yams. Like I said, we take Thanksgiving seriously. Fridge, my grandma instructed me from across the room. That's where desserts are going, for after. A few meandered over for conversation. They caught me up on their first year of college or the latest from their cross-country training. A few of them were dating new people, but none of their partners came. Our family prefers to keep holidays within the family. My cousin Melinda dabbed a finger in the cranberry sauce. I swatted at her. No cheating. Hey, she said, not all of us are unquenchable voids, just trying to get a head start. As we chatted, the knocking at the door continued. Family after family filed in until finally the knocking stopped completely. That's all of us? Uncle Steve announced and counted all of us wordlessly. He checked his watch. Might as well get started then. It's getting late. We gathered around two elongated dining room tables. We said grace. Dig in, my grandma announced. We did. She didn't, though, just watched us with a distant smile on her face. Sometimes we joke that grandma isn't actually part of the family, since she only got the family last name through marriage, not blood. Sometimes I think my family jokes too much. The tofu went first. It was the blandest on the table, no salt or spices or anything. The potatoes went next, no butter. They were easy to slide down in between copious gulps of water. Not fair, my Aunt Hestia hissed as one of my cousins snatched the last spoonful of the potatoes with their bare hands. Our previous chatter had stopped completely. None of us were smiling now. We only ate, and ate, and ate. Green beans, yams, salad, stuffing, chicken. One of my youngest cousins grabbed a gravy boat and started chugging the whole thing. My uncle snarled and tried to wrestle it away. I was already through my second helpings of everything, way more than most others. I took a moment to laugh at the sight. A crouton lodged itself in my throat. My eyes went wide. I couldn't breathe. I struggled at my neck. I was suffocating. I pounded my chest. The piece of salad flew out. It wasn't the only thing. A funnel of brown, white, pink sludge fountained from my throat. I managed to turn my head, and the majority of it went slushing onto the newly shampooed carpet. For one terrible moment, everyone stopped eating. Mouths hung open with stuffing half chewed. Eyes went wide and pitying. They resumed their feast with renewed vigor. I wiped my mouth and fought back nausea. I reached for the cranberry sauce, but Melinda snatched it away. Please, I said, let me catch back up. She said nothing, but her eyes apologized as she guzzled the bowl of red, sticky sludge. I reached for another tray, but that was snatched up too. A third. My Uncle Steve took it this time. All the food was nearly gone. There was still time. I was a teenage guy. I could fight through the Cuisinies. I didn't have to lose. Not necessarily. Something knocked at the door. Nobody looked. Why bother? We already knew the whole family was here. The fighting for the final scraps grew more and more violent. Kicking, screeching, clawing. Again, a knock. This time my grandma twisted in her lifted seat. They're early, she said and stood. No, there was practically nothing left. Melinda licked the last dried crust of potatoes from the rim of the pan. My grandma walked for the door. The knocking grew more rapid. I cast my eyes around wildly. My vomit splattered the rug and tiling. For one disgusting moment, I imagined scooping it into my open hands and tipping it into my mouth. There was no other option. Except I sprinted for the kitchen, more specifically, the fridge. Cheating, my Aunt Hestia screamed and scrambled up after me. I threw open the fridge just as the front door banged open. A cold gust swept through the house, but the only sensation on my skin was the coolness from the open box in front of me. There it was. I yanked off the glossy saran wrap and seized tremendous handfuls of pumpkin pie, straight from the platter. In the other room, My extended family went quiet. Aunt Hestia, who'd sprung up after me, suddenly slowed, hovering in the entryway between the two rooms. Her eyes opened wide, filling with a familiar, terrible horror. She was in its sight. I, however, wasn't. Not yet. I shoved pie into my mouth by the handful. I barely paused to chew, and I didn't need to. That was the beauty of pumpkin puree. It came pre-chewed, pre-mashed, ready to slide willingly down the fleshy tunnel that was my throat. My back arched, and I gagged. 3 times I gagged, but each time I swallowed the nausea away with more pie. There was still a bit of food in my stomach from before the sick. That had to count for something. My stomach was already bursting again. My vision went lopsided and dizzy. I doubted I'd ever eat pumpkin again, but for now I had to keep going, had to keep eating, had to... I froze. The guest, the one Grandma had let in, had finished inspecting the rest of my family, pausing by each of them. Already, it was visible in the corner of my vision, but I didn't dare turn my head to look at it. Instead, I stayed still, like my aunt. Perfectly still. It inspected her. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling, but it bent low to look over her face, stare in each eye, pat her stomach. Then it was my turn. I didn't breathe, didn't even blink. The being towered over me, long-limbed, perfectly white, the whiteness of vanilla ice cream. It pressed 6 long fingers against my stomach and pushed in, testing. Its head lowered to just beside my ear, and the thing let out a soft moan of pain, of hunger. It straightened. The white creature stepped away. I allowed myself a slow, careful inhale of air as the thing loped back towards the others and paused at my Aunt Hestia. It bent low and sniffed her one more time. Then it devoured her. Her shrieks were violent things, sharp, terrified, piercing. There was squelching, ripping, tearing, the snap of something breaking, the gulp of things being guzzled down. All of it was finished within the minute, ending with her bones clattering to the tiled kitchen floor. They were perfectly white, the white of vanilla ice cream. The creature let out a single sigh of relief, then left the way it had come, back through the front door. My grandma shut it behind it. I gulped. I wiped at my mouth. I rejoined the rest of my family in the dining room. For a long while, none of us spoke. We sat there in our chairs. In my case, a vomit-splattered one, staring at the array of empty dishes and plates licked clean. One of the serving bowls was cracked from the commotion. Nearly every glass had toppled on its side, and cranberry juice stained the tablecloth a blood red. One of the younger cousins sniffed. Grandma made her way back to the head of the table. She took her seat and smiled a faint, satisfied smile. "Now," she said, "who's ready for dessert?" When I was younger, bedtime was always a difficult and scary thing for me. I wasn't scared of the dark, but rather something entirely sinister in its own right. My young mind always chalked it up to dreaming or my family playing jokes on me. Looking back, I feel like an absolute idiot for even thinking that my family members would go through the effort of trying to mess with me so late into the night. Well, family member, I should say. It was just me and my mom growing up. Mom was an artist, or at least she was super into artsy stuff when I was younger. She was particularly interested in the making of clothes. Consequently, we had a few mannequins in the house. They'd always stay in her study, where she used them for fitting. I wish we could have realized what was happening sooner. Often, I'd have bad dreams, terrifying experiences that my mind conjured up when I went to sleep. I think That was why it was so hard to come to terms with it. It was also the main reason why going to bed was such a difficult task for me. I'm still not sure whether the first couple were nightmares or not. I vividly remember all 3 times I experienced it. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. I'd gotten into bed and was actually able to fall asleep without much trouble. What didn't happen so easily was staying asleep. At first, it was blackness, and then my eyes opened. I was in my room, still in my bed. Something was different though. My room was much darker than it had been a few hours earlier, which made sense, considering it just naturally got darker the later it was. That wasn't what scared me though. What scared me so badly I hid under the covers was a figure standing in the middle of my bedroom. The only reason I could even see them was due to the faint bits of moonlight streaming in from between my blinds. I looked at the figure just long enough to make out some slight details on what they were wearing. They stood stock still, clad in a pair of black, what I assumed to be, dress pants and a white shirt with black stripes. That was it. I couldn't make out their face. Not that it mattered. They just stood there, motionless. I didn't suppress a scream. Rather, I couldn't. I was so completely and utterly terrified in that very moment that I could do nothing but retreat into my covers and wait until it went away. I might have fallen asleep. Not sure. Can't really remember. All I do remember is hiding under my covers one moment and waking up to a brightly sunlit room the next. The figure was gone, so I assumed I'd had a dream. I still wasn't sure, so I asked my mom about it during breakfast. "Hey Mom," I said, Did you put one of your mannequins in my room?" Her face went from calm to nervous. "What? No, of course not. Why would you ask that?" "Oh, okay," I said. "It was probably a dream then." "What?" she asked. "It looked like a person in my room, but I could barely see them or anything. When I woke up, it didn't look like anyone had been in my room. I think it was dream," I said. She said. "Sounds weird. You let me know if anything happens, okay?" "Okay." I feel the need to state that my mother is not and has never been a stupid person. She thought out the possibilities. She searched the whole house after we talked and found nothing. She couldn't have thought that my dreams, though vivid, might have not been just dreams. But I digress. There was no way anyone could have broken in. She even checked our cellar and the parts of it we refused to go in. Nothing. The fact that she found nothing makes what happened even harder to think of, to explain, but I'll do my best. The last incident happened about a week after the first. I had just gotten to sleep and was having a relatively good dream when it was interrupted. This time, there was an actual noise. I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock falling off my dresser and crashing to the floor. I was sure that I'd kept it well away from the edge of my dresser, but I could have been wrong. Thinking that I'd just placed it too haphazardly, I undid my covers a little and leaned out and down to pick it up. I recoiled in horror. There, sticking out slightly from under my bed, was an arm. Not a severed one. It was clearly attached to someone. The alarm clock hadn't landed near the hand, so I couldn't make it out. But I just assumed it was a similar situation to the one I'd experienced a week prior. The light glow of my alarm clock showed me that the arm belonged to the same figure I'd seen. The same white shirt with black stripes. I shot back and once again retreated to the safe space that was my blanket. I shut my eyes tight. Somehow, despite the unyielding terror, I'd felt witnessing that very same figure under my bed, I managed to fall asleep. The next morning, Mom was pissed. I'd gone downstairs for breakfast, once again preparing to tell her about what I thought might have been a dream. She was in a mood, though. Apparently, some animal had been messing around outside our house and broke one of the windows leading into the cellar. She was grumbling about two things. One, the fact that whatever animal had broken the window might have still been in the cellar. When she checked, some items had been shuffled around, most notably near the dark crawl called space-like area. Two, how she was going to afford to fix the window. Both her and I found out that she wouldn't need to worry about getting it repaired when I tried to speak to her. What? She snapped. I, I stuttered. Sorry, she said. Just a little peeved about the window. What do you want to tell me? I saw it again, I said. The figure. I think I was dreaming. You dream about that a lot, she said. Do you remember anything from it? It was wearing one of the striped shirts you made, I said. My mother's face went still. She didn't speak much just then. When she did, though, it was serious. She grabbed me by the hand, and we moved towards the front door. As I was getting my shoes on, I asked her a question. Why are you upset? She didn't answer until we were out of the house and in her car. As she started it, she looked at me and spoke with a very serious tone. I didn't do that. I never made any striped shirts. We moved out that same day. I didn't want to move. I hated it above most else. But more than moving, I'd learned to hate that hodunk, white trash garbage fire of a town. The place was out of jobs, out of good men, and out of places where you could get a decent glass of white wine. And as I'd gotten older, those were the things I'd most come to appreciate in life. Thankfully, I'm not a complete dick for brains, unlike a certain not good man who might have jump-started my decision to get right the fuck out of that town, which meant that I planned ahead. I did my research as I looked for a new place to settle, and once I found an apartment, I immediately applied for jobs nearby. Anything would do to start, and sure enough, I got a couple interviews set up. Before long, I'd signed on to start about a month after move-in day as the office manager of some mid-tier tech company. When the day came, I left Mr. Dick for Brains a note that said, "Sayonara, motherfucker." He'd know I was serious. It was an inside joke. The hard part was done. I'd left, and I would never be going back. A couple weeks went by before I could sleep through the night alone, and before I got used to the smell. Not a bad smell, just the smell of the town. Almost salty, although the ocean was nowhere near. Eventually, I found a good rhythm. I walked around a lot, exploring places. Small town as it was, there wasn't a whole lot. Found a bar that served decent white wine, which was enough for now. The town was surrounded by a magnificent, dense forest. When you got close to it, it felt as if it roared at you, as if the trees old as rocks were about to fall right on you. I'm not sure what kind of trees they were, but they were much taller than the ones back home. Either way, I liked the forest, and one time I saw through the trees some high school track runners whizzing by, which reminded me of home as well. When I was young, when it had still been a home. I'd run track myself in high school. I always liked it, but after you got good enough to be the best in school, there wasn't much more to improve. Our school was small, so that achievement came fast. And when there's nowhere to go, you get bored. And when you get bored, you do something else. And out there, back home, there wasn't much to do besides drinking, smoking, and driving around. For most guys out there, their days were spent with either their dick or a gear stick tucked between their hands. For us ladies, the prospects were even more slim. But I was an adult now, and the memories of running track came back sweeter than I would have liked. Burnt sugar. The next day, I went out and bought some running shoes. A few days went by, and the shoes were still untouched. Social anxiety had suddenly taken a hold on me, almost nostalgic in its absurdity, and the thick venom it spewed into my veins, making the small so large and frightening. Although I'd gotten a good idea of the streets and paths of the town, I didn't feel like taking a run there. For one, I'd only seen other runners take the path in the woods, so it almost felt like an unspoken rule that if you were to run, that's where you do it. But of course, I didn't want to go there with all them high school kids and make a fool out of myself. I reckoned I was dutifully out of shape, and looking like a decrepit broad who could barely do a mile felt like the disaster that would inevitably happen. Not that I, an adult woman, should care what some kids think, old habits and all. On the other hand, I'd gotten a pretty good idea of where the track started and where it ended. The entrance was up a hill that opened up into the woods just west of town, and it tumbled its way through the trees and came out onto an eastern field, which led to a road that led back to town once more. Judging by how often I saw those kids, the trail couldn't have been that long. Maybe a few miles? Anyway, I'm truly trying not to ramble, but to portray how my mind worked at the time. Shuffling itself over and around itself, making up new scenarios, the droplets of which overwhelmed my capacity, forming a pool of self-inflicted social anxiety that stood right at the bottom of my throat and above my heart and lungs. Well, it gives an idea of where I was at. What I'm saying is what they all say. I know what I saw, and I'm not fucking crazy. I couldn't sleep, but I couldn't rest either. It was all just becoming a blur. And one night, I looked at the shoes sitting at the foot of the door and said, fuck it. I'm going for a run. Right fucking now. And it made sense too. No one else would be out there. It would be nice and cool. I owned a headlamp. Barring a fucking mountain lion biting my ass, it was a good enough plan. Besides, if I didn't do something to get that nervous energy out, I think I would have exploded. And when I explode, that's when Mr. Dick for Brains' name would somehow show up on my phone, and I'd be back there again, in that loop, in all that I was trying to leave the fuck behind. I didn't even stretch. When I was out my front door, the town was dead quiet. It was cold. I thought to first walk up to the trail, but a warm-up jog was much more convenient. Besides, and I can't stress this enough, no one was outside. The streetlights didn't follow me far as I made my way to the beginning of the trail, clicking on my headlamp and admiring the preciseness with which the light illuminated everything I looked at. I felt like a car one that needed its oil changed and its tires replaced. My muscles teetered on the edge of cramping as they warmed up, and my lungs were heavier than I remembered. But my head was starting to clear. The cool air and the pure physicality of it all moved all those other thoughts to the sidelines. Not gone, but at least they were no longer in the way. At what I reckon was a mile in, I'd really hit my groove. My legs were locked into a pattern, my pace like the gears of a clock, each step falling into its place efficiently and smoothly. I cursed myself for not doing this earlier. And then I cursed hindsight and the curse of regret it bestows on everything good. Then I smiled, breathed in the forest air, and looked around at the dark forest around me in all its moonlit calm. Life felt like life again. It was up at the tree line, where the branches were thick and almost intertwined, where I noticed a gleaming. Must have been the fresh sap that reflected the moonlight, I thought, as my legs pulled me further along, not saying yes for a stop to look at the scenery. Yet something about it bothered me, and I couldn't quite say what that was. Just one of those gut feelings. But I didn't trust my gut. Or, more accurately, we had a complicated relationship. The decision to move was based on a gut feeling, but so was letting Mr. Dick for Brains into my life. So I let it slide and brought my attention back to my breathing and the crunching beat of my feet drumming the ground. The weird feeling had almost subsided until I saw it again, maybe half a mile later. It was lower this time, so I could see it better. 2 points of faint light gleaming against the dark sky and the black trees. As I moved closer, I kept my eyes on it, trying to figure it out before I passed it. With each step toward it, the shape around the gleaming revealed its form, lending itself to the light as well. It looked like a monkey, a really, really big monkey. Long limbs, strange and wide torso. It squatted on a branch, its eyes looking down. My gut said that the eyes were looking at me, which in turn meant that as I got closer, our eyes met. And when I was past it, I had to look back. I had to know if it had also turned to look at me, whatever it was. When I did, my chest tightened and my legs almost locked up, but I couldn't stop running. I had to run faster. Behind me, the tree line was awash with gleaming eyes, like an ocean of stars. There must have been 100 of them, all hunched up in the trees, silent and unmoving, watching me. Why were they watching me? How long had they been there? As if in answer, I saw some of the eyes blink out like dying stars against the infinite cosmos. But they weren't gone. They had simply dropped down. And they were running too. All I could think of was fuck, fuck, fuck. The instinct wasn't unfamiliar. I'd been chased and stalked and all of that shit before. When I felt like this, I knew it was best to get out and as fast as you can. The problem was that I didn't know where I was, at least not exactly. The only way out was forward, and as I tried to untangle my mind for how long I'd been running for, more and more eyes kept blinking out and then reappearing on the ground. My head swiveled back and forth as I looked back and kept my course steady and the trail under my feet. My lungs protested as I picked up the pace. Not because I wanted to, but because they were getting closer. Their step was light, yet altogether they produced a rumble like an earthquake. I couldn't keep it up. They were going to get to me sooner or later. I didn't want to know what would happen if they did, so I ran. Perhaps for my life, as death itself was surely at my heels. Time lost meaning as pain grew in my muscles and my lungs like poison ivy, twisting itself around and telling me, no pain is too great if it means you'll live. And suddenly, there it was. The way out of the woods, the trail stopped where the field began. In the distance, I could see the road lights like angels. Of course, there was no way to know if the creatures behind me would stop at the edge of the forest, but somehow I knew they would. Maybe it made sense. Maybe it was pure hope, compressed through and through into wishful reality. You might think you're going to die, but you don't ever believe you're going to die. Thankfully, I was right. When I crossed the edge, the footsteps became lesser. I looked behind me at their eyes, most at ground level, some climbing the trees to get a better look. It was like a galaxy unto itself, a tsunami of stars. I thought I could feel the strange heat of their bodies and smell their acrid sweat wafting in the air. Once I got to the road, I finally stopped running and collapsed onto the road. My ears rang as TV static curtained over my eyes. The next thing I knew, some guy was shaking me awake with one hand, dialing someone with the other. He seemed relieved when I came to, and once I could stand up, he led me to his truck. We sped off towards town. I thought he was in a rush to take me to the hospital, but after a few minutes the guy eased up on the gas and slowed to a cruise. His eyes landed on me every once in a while as we drove, like he wanted to ask something, but didn't know if it would be okay. You know, he finally said, I saw them. Them? I said. In the woods. They were waiting. Hoping you'd go back, I guess. My heart sank. It all came back. I was too tired for it, but my body still tried to prepare for fight or flight. I wasn't up for either. I hoped this guy was safe. You know who they are? You've seen them too? The men in the trees? I asked him. The man fell quiet for a moment. Grave. Unfortunately, yes. And I beg of you, never go back there, not even during the daytime. To that I laughed, catching the guy off guard with my levity. Look, you can be damn fucking sure I won't be going back there ever again. He planted his eyes back on the road. Right, obviously. But who are they? I repeated. He thought about that for a moment. They're the ones they write scary stories about. When I was 15, tired of staying at home, I decided to go for a walk. At that moment, I had no idea it would turn out to be the most creepy and terrifying day of my life. All my friends were busy, so I went alone. I didn't usually walk alone, but that day, something seemed to push me to do it. I immediately decided on the route I would take. I often do this because I don't like wandering without a purpose. That day, my goal was just to walk around. It's important to mention that it was evening, approaching night. As I walked, the streets gradually emptied. About 20 minutes later, I reached a familiar part of the neighborhood. After walking around there, it was already dark, and there was not a single person on the streets. While returning home, I unexpectedly ran into my teacher's mother. We talked for about 5 minutes. She warned me that the area was not safe at night and insisted I wait for her son, who would soon go out and take the same route. I politely declined and continued on my way. I wasn't afraid of the dark or unsafe neighborhoods. After walking a short distance, I turned a corner, and suddenly an older woman, quite short, appeared. She started following my exact path. When I slowed down, she slowed down. When I sped up, she sped up. I finally dared to look at her face. She was dressed completely in black, and her wrinkled face filled me with an intense, paralyzing fear. My heart raced, and I immediately increased my pace. It's important to clarify that, as I mentioned, there were no people on the street, but the road nearby had a main highway with quite a lot of cars. I had to go to a pedestrian path and descend a slope to cross the highway. As we approached the path, I decided not to look back and just run through the underpass, climb up, and get home. I ran down the slope, and glancing back one last time, I saw her standing still, just staring at me. After passing through the underpass and climbing back up, I froze. She was right there in front of me, wearing the same black clothes, with the same terrifying face. I sprinted the rest of the way home without looking back. On the way, I met a classmate, told him everything that had just happened, and we ran home. I saw her a few more times after that, but I cannot say for sure. It was the same woman. That day, however, I can guarantee that I saw that face. I have experienced many scary situations in my life, but nothing compared to that night. Logically, she couldn't have passed through the underpass faster than me. I'm physically faster. I also saw and heard that the underpass was not large. You might think maybe she ran across the highway, but that seems unlikely, since I was faster and there were many speeding cars. Maybe it was her twin sister, but it seems strange to wear the same clothes. I'm even more certain, because both had a gold tooth in the same place. I really don't know what it could have been. My friends said maybe I imagined it, or that it was just something that happened. But even 2 years later, I still cannot forget that day and her face. I'm making this post in hopes that nobody else ends up here. I'm kind of lonely right now, so if I ramble a little, I apologize. I find it unsettling that your space can be exactly like your neighbor's space. Not like in the "aw, poor baby doesn't have money to afford a real home" kind of way. The housing market made sure of that. It's more I can move everything I own next door, and my neighbor can take everything they own into mine, and nothing would change kind of way. Like no matter what you do to be different, you'll still be able to fit into a mold decided by someone else who makes more money than most people ever will. You really only understand this once you've worked in a lot of apartments. But one complex usually only has 2 or 3 different layouts for each apartment. So once you've been in a few, you've been in every single one in that complex. I have had so many instances where I know the layout of an apartment or a hallway better than the people who actually live there. But also that person who makes more money than you should at least be able to fucking count. Sure, the people who live there know how to get to their one apartment they live in by sheer luck until they have memorized the directions. However, it is mind-bendingly infuriating when I think 306 is going to be on the 3rd floor, 6 doors down from one. And some bored millionaire secretly found it hilarious to number the units by the Fibonacci sequence. Now, an 8-hour job just took 12. Because I kept getting lost. That was irrelevant. I'm just really hungry and needed to vent about that before I died. Basically, what I'm saying is, apartment complexes are creepy, so I'm not super stoked about dying in one. Once I realized how much deep shit I'm actually in, I holed myself up in one of the apartments here, waiting for starvation to make me pass out. My hands are already shaking. It doesn't help that I can't see a third of my phone. This job was supposed to be fairly easy. We were changing out all the exit signs to LED. It would have been pretty chill, only a few days. Maybe only one if we try hard enough. Even better, 5 guys were sent out to do the job. Me, Andrew, Nick, Christopher, and Randall. We met at the warehouse to grab the product and supplies for the day, and all rode in the truck together to the job site. "You're working by yourself today," Nick informed me. I wasn't surprised. We usually try our best to break into pairs so that we can work efficiently. Nick and Christopher were much faster than me, so it made sense to pair the new guys with them. While I felt for whoever got paired with Andrew, I was relieved that at least it didn't have to be me. Sounds good, I replied, taking my phone out now so that I could pick what playlist I wanted to listen to for the day. Randall, you're working with Christopher, Andrew working with me, continued Nick. The others nodded their approval. I was a little bummed that I wasn't working with Nick. We spent most of our time talking about indie punk music and art house films that I haven't seen. But this job could potentially be done today. So it made sense that we should all focus instead of screwing around. I took my fitness tracker off and handed it to Christopher, asking him to charge it for me. I don't really work out, but with all the walking I have to do on these jobs, it's kind of fun to be able to see how many steps I get in every day. Go charge it yourself, Christopher poked. I can't reach it, I crooned. Christopher plugged it into the charger in the front of the car. I thanked him and turned to Randall, speaking loud enough for Christopher to hear. Man, people can be so mean sometimes. Randall smiled as Christopher told me to shut up, or I'll never get my watch back. We arrived at the job site and Nick went to tell the leasing office we had arrived, while the rest of us got to opening boxes and prepping signs. Then, after Nick got back, he explained the plan. Travis, you start at the top floor. I'll start second from the top with Andrew. Christopher, you and Randall can start at the bottom. We'll meet in the middle if we get all of this done today. Sound good for everybody? Agreement spread around the group, and we headed inside to the lobby. Huh, that's weird, muttered Randall. Everyone else was already thinking it too. In spite of the fact that this building had 8 stories, there wasn't an elevator in the lobby. Thanks for giving me the top floor, Nick, I groaned. It wasn't on purpose, Nick retorted. Did you think I knew that there wasn't going to be an elevator? Well, now my legs are going to be sore. I feigned moping, and you know how I get with sore legs. I grabbed my stuff and made my way to the stairwell at the end of the hall. Christopher didn't show it, but I knew he was dancing with glee with his good fortune. You 3 have fun, called Christopher, as I put an AirPod in and felt the white stripes melt my frustrations away. Once I finally reached the top floor, I was exhausted. Carrying a ladder and a box of exit signs at the same time left me gasping for air as I opened the door. Unfortunately, I chuffed a huge swath of putrid air and immediately choked. To be completely honest, it wasn't the worst thing I had ever smelled. I live in Colorado, and offensive odors tend to come with the territory when your state is known for smoking weed. So I assumed my nostrils had been assailed by some concoction of scented candles, burnt incense, and marijuana. It was simply the smell of rot. I just didn't know that yet. I checked my wrist to see how many steps I had gotten already. Motherfucker! Where my fitness tracker was supposed to be was just a shitty tan line, because I had forgotten to get the fitness tracker from the car after asking Christopher to charge it. There was no way I was going to head back down those stairs just for my fitness tracker, so I resigned to change out the exit signs without knowing how many steps I'd put in today. This wasn't even the worst of my luck. I sat down on the floor to give my legs a chance to rest and started pre-drilling holes into the wall-mounted exit signs. This was when I took the chance to look around the apartment for the first time too. The door numbers, unsurprisingly, didn't make any sense. The one right outside the stairwell was numbered 106-1-in-1. The door to the left was numbered 113444, and the one after that was 9455. It was stranger than usual, but I didn't have to go inside any of them, so I didn't really mind. I was also distracted by the unique ways they were painted on the doors. There was no uniformity. The large salmon pink numbers were vertical on some of the charcoal gray doors, but others were horizontal. Off in the distance, I could have sworn one of them might have been painted upside down. I want to describe whoever painted these numbers as incredibly drunk, but that wouldn't make sense. Sure, there was no consistency in how they were placed on the doors, yet they all were individually aligned perfectly. I shrugged and continued working, deciding not to commit too much effort towards thinking about it. I quietly prayed nobody came out and saw a 21-year-old crisscross applesauce on the floor of an apartment hallway staring at doors. Damn it! My drill had gone through an exit sign, piercing my left pocket and jamming against my phone. I frantically pulled my phone out of my pocket, watching a large black blob of damaged LCD spread over the top third of my phone. I tried to use it. Functionally, the phone worked fine. I could still make calls and listen to music, but there was no more Clash of Clans or doom-scrolling Instagram reels until I got a new phone. Frustrated, I jammed my phone back into my pocket and went back to work. I pulled hard on an old exit sign, hoping it would break off the bracket when suddenly the lights started to flicker. I stood still for a moment. This was probably my fault. The exit sign was still wired in, and I had most likely shorted a wire from my outburst. I calmed myself down and took down the sign the rest of the way. The light stopped flickering once I had installed the new exit sign. I sighed in relief, thankful I hadn't blown a breaker, and continued on with my work. The hallways forked off in every direction almost randomly. It felt like a maze. When I thought I had finally reached the end of a hallway, it split off into two more directions. Or a door at the end was simply hiding more hallway. It felt like I would never reach the end. I let myself get into a rhythm while Ado screamed Japanese words that I planned on learning someday. There was no reason to rush things. I would be done when I got done. The lights flickered a few more times while I worked. I paid no mind to them anymore. They seemed old and, most likely, just needed to be replaced. Another project for another time. I had become mostly blind to the smell. Whether my olfactory senses had been singed beyond repair, or I just didn't care anymore. It was a welcome relief. That was when my music stopped. It wasn't in the middle. It just ended. I checked my phone as best I could with the screen damaged and realized my whole playlist had ended. That's odd, I said aloud to myself. This playlist was 8 hours of perfectly procured music I had discovered over the years. If I had reached the end of the playlist, that meant I had been working for 8 whole hours. Given the bad luck with my phone and fitness tracker, I had no other way of knowing what time it was until just now. Unless I deliberately went out of my way to look at the clock app on my phone. Why hadn't anybody called me to say we were done? In fact, there weren't any notifications at all on my phone. Was there no service in here? No, that didn't make any sense because I didn't download my playlist. Where was everybody? I gathered the trash and my tools and put them in a pile next to my ladder. I decided to go find everybody to get an update on the plan, and then I would return to bring everything downstairs. I also ate one of the 2 protein bars in my tool bag, since I had apparently worked through lunch as well. It felt like hours until I could find a stairwell. I hadn't really taken the time to think about it before, but now that I was in the dead silence of the apartment complex, I couldn't hear anything besides the sounds of my own footsteps and the faint buzzing of dying fluorescent bulbs. It unsettled me. I selected a new playlist and let Dayglow add a lighter tone to the atmosphere, just so I had something else to hear besides the droll emptiness. As I thought about it, I hadn't seen a single person leave or enter an apartment the entire time I was working. I told myself everyone here was just an incel stoner that never left their house. When I finally found a stairwell, I hurried down the steps as quickly as I could. The emptiness was beginning to drive me mad. I needed to talk to someone, anyone. There was no such luck to be had, however. It was the same crimson hallways with the same pink numbers on the same grey doors in the same disorderly but orderly fashion as the floor above. I jogged down the hallways. Something about this place was completely unnerving. That final thought was what made me begin to run down the halls. "Nick!" I shouted, desperately hoping they'd hear me. "Andrew?" I thought maybe they had gone down to the next floor. But when I tried to retrace my steps, the stairwell wasn't where it should have been. At least, where I think the stairwell should have been. The door numbers seemed to shift almost every time I looked away from them. 05678, 73447, 843, 4949, 72, 36542. It made not a lick of damn sense. My legs eventually grew weary from running. I slumped against the ground and accepted I was lost. As I breathed heavily, the rank air returned in full force to my nostrils. Maybe I could knock on the doors of people who lived here and ask them for help. I wasn't a very social person, but desperate times called for desperate measures, and I would rather talk to a smelly stoner than be lost for one more second. So I knocked. Silence. "I guess no one is here," I muttered to the empty air around me. I tried another door. Nothing. I tried another, and another, and another. But still nothing. Finally, I got so fed up that I just kicked a door down. It was easier than I expected, and the door was weirdly soft, like the inside of a beetle. When you step on it, I was then met by an even more foul smell than what had been lurking in the hallways. My eyes teared up from the odor, and I still wish that was the worst thing I experienced in those rooms. As I wiped the tears from my eyes in an attempt to see again, they focused on something even worse: human bones. They were littered around the room like discarded trash. Somehow, at that moment, the lights began to flicker once again. Horrified, I rushed to the next door, kicked it down, and heard it squish as it fell. More bones. But in the corner, I saw a person. It wasn't Nick or Andrew, but somebody I had never met before. I screamed, "Holy shit!" The person was conscious, just barely, but conscious. They looked at me, but made no attempt to speak to me or approach me. I couldn't make out what they looked like. Man? Woman? Child? They were emaciated beyond anything I had ever seen before, and their body seemed to be melting. I hurried to them, but wasn't sure what to do to help. What do you do when you watch someone die? I had lost family members and friends before, to various diseases and accidents, but this was a total stranger. In the midst of all of this, I pieced together the truth of the smell, but had other things on my mind besides that to worry about. Their skin continued to melt away, and bones were revealed where their tissue once was. They seemed to be moving their lips now. I attempted to lift the mass of skin and bone to my ear as I leaned down, but it was sticky and wet, like oatmeal. It even dried on my hand a little as I pulled it away in shock. By now, Their lips had stopped moving one. Whatever they were going to say, I had missed the chance to hear them. I looked at where their skin had gone, but it was sinking into the sage green shag carpet of the apartment. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at the flesh as it dissolved into the floor. Grey goo started to stream from the nostrils of the skeleton, and I realized that it must have been the brain of the body. The apartment had saved it for last, like a special dessert after a big meal. It might have been hours until I stood up again. The horror of what just occurred etched itself into my brain. Every detail, like a movie, permanently stained my conscience. I ran like I never had before. I shouted and screamed the names of my co-workers at the top of my lungs. My throat grew sore from the effort, but there was nothing in response. Days passed. Weeks, maybe. I used to check what the time was, but now it's a waste of effort. I'm trapped here forever. I had rationed my food at the beginning, but it was only one protein bar, so that didn't last me very long. I did find Nick. He was past the point of saving, already melting into the floor. The lights flickered the whole time he melted too. Now I'm here, alone. Before you ask, yes, I've already tried killing myself, in more ways than you can imagine. My tools are long gone, so I can't use any of those. Everything in here is too soft or too weak for me to kill myself with too. So my only choice is to wait until starvation hits me. Weirdly, dehydration is not a thing here. It seems to enjoy watching others suffer. I hold myself up in one of the apartments, apartment number 671-346089. Now that I've had enough time to sit in here, the decor is horrific. The sage green carpet clashes disgustingly with the crimson walls. There's a mustard yellow couch here and no TV. There's still Wi-Fi to the outside world, obviously. It just didn't want me to contact anybody already inside. I contacted my family, told them I love them, and now I'm writing this to you at home. Don't ever come here. You won't be able to find anyone to save them. If you know someone who's been here, just grieve them as if they're dead, because they probably already are. Just please don't ever come here.